lesson 7, I've entitled this as Beauty's the Meal, right? We're still looking at chapter 5, verse 3 to 14 today. Yeah, Beauty's the Meal, right? The meal means meekness, like shy type, that kind of thing, gentleness. Yeah. Okay. So the theme we understand from the book of Esther is the providence of God. It's the providence of God. Yeah? And Mordecai's challenge is what actually hits Esther as she faces the dilemma, and she has to come to make a decision. Who knows that you have come to this to your royal position for such a time as this? Yeah, and we understand. Okay, just a quick recap. The first part of it was the danger to God's people, and we are now today we should be closing the second part when we look at the decision of God's servant, right? So, what's the story so far? And then next, the following week, we will go into part 3. But what's the story so far is Act 1, we see the danger to God's people. And we started with the drunkenness of Xerxes that caused a dethronement of Vashti. And then finally, that led to the discovery of Esther, and that puts her in that position whereby she's able to do something when her people, the Jews, were being threatened with annihilation, right, by the decree of Haman. So Act chapter 2, where we were, is when Mordecai, of course, heard of this. He wept, he tore his clothes, he went into mourning, and the whole city was under confusion. And then when Esther went to ask him what's the matter, then he began to tell what are the details, including the large sum of money, the 10,000 talents that Haman pledged to put into the treasury, right, in the sense of put his case against the Jews, right? So Esther was caught in that situation whereby she was now queen, and but she had kept her identity secret in the sense of that she did not say that she was a Jew. And right now, and that's where we saw the challenge of Mordecai, right? Now is the time for you to do something. So how did the last previous lesson ended was that this was her decision. After she called Mordecai and the rest of the Jews to pray for her, it says on the third day, she put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. And the king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. And when he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hands. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. So in that sense, that it's like a cliffhanger there, right? At the close of that episode. So what's going to happen next, right? Yeah. So now Esther was given her opportunity. Now, before I go into that, there was one thing that I had to deal with. It was a question, right? When we talk about fasting and prayer and action, right? So we did cover these few things, right? I won't go through the details of it. We understand that fasting was a way of showing great contrition, and we want to express our dependence on God in times of crisis, in times of great sorrow, right? And part of fasting is also to come before God, to appeal to Him, to present our requests, to present our prayers before Him, right? And out of that, we see that Esther has to take action. So obedience must follow regardless of the outcome. So the question was asked, why is prayer, the word prayer? Because almost everywhere you read in the Bible, we always have fast and pray. Nehemiah fasted and prayed, yeah? And so on. We see details of his prayer, what he actually prayed about. But in the book of Esther, not only God is not mentioned. Yes, they fasted, but the word prayer is not mentioned. It's not specifically mentioned at all by Esther, and in the book of Esther as well. So I'd like to present a few options for us, all right? Okay, why prayer is not mentioned in Esther. Now, this is just to contrast a little bit, right? When Jehoshaphat was faced with the enemies of Israel, the Ammonites, right, and the Moabites surrounded the city. It says, alarmed, Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, right? So that was his intent, to ask the Lord to say how to resolve this issue, how to call upon the Lord for help. So the king said, he proclaimed a fast for all of Judah. All right. And the people of Judah came together to seek help from the Lord. Yeah, and they came from every town in Judah to seek him. So fasting and prayer and calling upon the name of the Lord is part of the Jewish practice, the religious practice. So this is Second Chronicles, right? So that this is the time that is before the exile, right? Before the exile, before the time of Esther. So this is steeped in the history of the Jews as well. So it's when they talk about fasting, they're automatically linked to prayer. Now the question is, we know that from the book of Esther, is that the Jews have been away in exile for about 3 to 4 generations. First thing we may ask is, have they forgotten the Lord? Now, why I say Yahweh here, right, or the Lord, is just to differentiate that from the other gods or the other deities, right? That the Persian people or the other races or other nationalities may worship. Okay, have they forgotten the Lord after 4 generations in exile? But I believe that the answer is no. They have not forgotten, because Haman did tell the king that these Jewish people, they have a different culture, they have a probably different religion, right? So they have not forgotten. I don't think they have forgotten the Lord. Yeah, the fact that they went into Israel, they went into exile. It says we find that they actually focuses their attention, directs their attention to the one and only God, to Yahweh. And this way they begin to cut off their association with idols, because they recognize the sin of idolatry. So it's quite unlikely that they've forgotten the Lord. But the second possibility is this, that the authors, right, of Esther, now when we study the book of Esther, we see that internally there's this, at the end of it, the last chapter of Esther, we did say that Mordecai recorded this and Esther wrote it down for a reason, right? For the reason to remind the Jews about the threat they have and God's then the deliverance, right? But is it possible that the authors have omitted the mention of Yahweh to prevent future recrimination against the Jews? Why do we say that? Because at that time, if it's written during that time, and there are also various suggestions that Ezra could have also written it, the book of Esther. It's kind of like rewritten 2 times, right? And it could have, could have deliberately avoided the mention of God in order to prevent religious discrimination against the Jews. It's possible because the Persian Empire was still around, all right, and the Persian king sometimes considered himself as a god king, right? So to put another god higher than the king himself, right, is asking for trouble. So they were sensitive in that way. So that's, for me, I think that could be a possibility. The third possibility was that the way to highlight, when something is so obvious that you always do, when you don't mention it, then it actually stands out like an elephant in the room, a silent elephant in the room, right? So it's a way to highlight the hiddenness of God and the providence of God by no mention of spirituality at all. So when prayer assumes that there is this spiritual dimension, right, that you are praying to a higher power, a deity, a God, right? So it could be a way to highlight the hiddenness and the providence of God. Okay, so it's a reverse literary technique, right? And the other reason could be this. Okay, it's written as a historical record, yeah, and this is a stronger reason. So the book of Esther is written as a historical record to give the reason, okay, for celebrating Purim, yeah, which is and Esther chapter 9, yeah, speaks about that. It says Mordecai, send letters to all the Jews, everywhere, and says to have them celebrate this on the 14 and 15 days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and so on and so forth. So it was a reminder. So as a historical record, later on we will see that Mordecai actually rose into prominent political position. So whatever he wrote will become history, right? Will be incorporated into the historical record, of the Persians. So the Persians would probably, if they use the word God, they may include, or they may replace the name God, Yahweh, whatever, with the names of their deities, when they are including in the history books. And prayer means assume that prayer to whom, right? So that's where for reasons of being wise in that manner, Mordecai or Esther or the author of Esther decided not to put any link to God or any spirituality, because it's purely history, right? So when we know this, when we read history, right, there's no mention of prayer. It's just facts and things like that. There's what they see is recorded there, right? So that's a purely historical record. And of course, the fifth one is prayer to Yahweh. When we see the previous dealings with when the Jews fast and things like that, prayer to Yahweh is implied when there's a call for fasting. So when they say fast, means immediately they say yes, fast and call upon the name of the Lord, right? So prayer comes together with fasting, right? And this is what Ezra, says that when they were about to go back to Israel, to Jerusalem, Ezra said, I proclaim a fast that we might humble ourselves before God and ask Him for a safe journey. Okay, so that's part of it. Joel says, declare a holy fast, right? Call a sacred assembly, call the elders and everyone in the land to the house of the Lord and cry out to the Lord. So fasting and prayer just comes hand in hand. And Jesus himself said this, yeah, when he said, when you fast, you don't make it so obvious and as if to draw attention to yourself, right? But when you fast, your fast is towards the Father who is unseen, and the Lord will reward you. That implies that there is a need when you fast, okay, a particular need that you are calling upon the Lord, and God will answer your prayers. So prayer and fasting always comes together. And in the book of Esther, I believe it is the last point is the strongest. It is implied in that way when they call for fast. So that's where we are at the moment. So coming into the passage for today. So now what's happening now? You see, so the king asked when Esther reached out and touched his scepter. It means the immediate threat to her life was removed because the king showed her favor. Right? Until that point, she didn't know whether the king was in a good mood or bad mood or wanted just to follow the rules and get her head chopped off, right? Because she appeared without being summoned. But yet, she received favor from the king, right? And verse 3 says, now the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Okay? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you, okay? Such a generous king. But then technically, I think when verse person gets married, it's always like half, right? Okay. In a case of divorce, they say half the property, divide up all the property. Maybe that's where it starts from, you know. So half the kingdom will be given to you. Okay. So verse 4. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king together with Haman come together and come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. And the king, bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asked. You know, another translation says, according to the word of Esther. Right? So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. You notice that there's a bit of a reversal now. In the first chapter of Esther, we read that the king says every woman must listen to the man, the husband, the king of the house. And here is a bit of a subtle reversal, so that we may do what the queen asks. So the author, you know, puts it in such a way, it's very subtle, but if you can pick up the irony of this, the sequence of reversal. Okay? So what is your request? So the king was asking. You see, but he didn't ask only one time, right? So as we look at that, I'd like us to look at just three aspects of Esther's decision, or Beauty's decision. One is she waited upon the Lord. Right? We mentioned about it briefly during the last lesson. It's like she waited upon the Lord. You see? So Psalms 130. Sorry, I kind of like lost my space at the moment. Psalms 130. Okay, verse 5 to 6, it says, I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait, or my soul waits for the Lord more than the watchmen wait for the morning, more than the watchmen wait for the morning. So it is something that's yearning, right? It is something, waiting upon the Lord is a yearning for the protection of God, for the light to come, for the dangers to be removed, for the presence of the Lord. Yeah? But waiting also means that it's not only just waiting for an answer, but the process of waiting, Paul Tripp says this, waiting isn't just about what you're hoping for, or about what you get at the end of the wait, but also about what you will become as you wait. Okay? The person you become as you wait upon the Lord. And in that process, we find that Esther became bold, right? From a little bit of trying to shift the responsibility when the request was first made to her, but she became bold and determined, right? So she waited upon the Lord. So waiting upon the Lord is a way that we can learn how to be patient, how to be patient before the Lord. And it is strategic. It's not a passive exercise and just do nothing. So patience is a great virtue. It's a capacity to accept or to tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Instead, we find peace in the time of waiting, and that will help you move ahead. So number one is you see this first aspect of her decision. Now, and in doing so, she also trusted in the Lord's goodness and timing, right? She did not rush. Okay, she didn't just simply go into the king's presence. Okay, but she waited for these 3 days. Okay? So Psalms 20 verse 7 says, "Some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord." Yeah? So they are brought to their knees and fall, but we who trusted in the Lord, we rise up and stand firm. Okay? So Martin Luther also puts it another way about faith and trusting in the Lord. It says faith is that living, daring confidence in God's grace, so sure and certain that a man could stake his life on it 1,000 times. Yeah. So when we are able to trust the Lord, it gives us this ability and this confidence in and through the Lord, right? So that's how she trusted the Lord. So she trusted the Lord. So, and the third aspect of it is that she obeyed, and in doing so, she risked her life, right? And obedience is central to our faith as well, right? Through a real faith would result in obedience, yeah, and that would often requires risk. Okay? We went through the book of Acts. We see how the apostles and Paul put their lives on the line, yeah, and faith in God will always demand that degree, different degrees of risk. Sometimes we even risk on the simple level, we risk losing face, okay, or people laughing at us. I went to cut my hair, yeah, just I can't remember, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the barber asked me, what do Christians, how do Christians celebrate, deal with this Cheng Beng? So you know that my Mandarin is terrible. So all I can say is this a very, as in a sense that for Christians it's very simple. It's a 很简单的 and just to tell him that God takes care of the Christian, so we don't have to do a lot of complicated rituals and things like that. Yeah. So in my very broken way, broken Mandarin, I just try and share. Can laugh at my broken Mandarin, but this is a bit of a risk. Okay, small kinds of. So question is, what kind of risk do we take when we seek to obey God? Okay, when we seek to obey God. Okay, so whoever, it says. When Jesus said in Luke, right, chapter 14, verse 26, 27, if anyone wants to come to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Okay, there is this risk involved in cross carrying, right? Okay, so these are the three things I think that when we look at the beauty's decision, okay, Esther's decision, that she waited, she trusted, and she risked her life, right? So she did not delay in going to the king. After the 3 days, she went to the king, right? She went to the king. And waiting upon the Lord, fasting actually gave her the strength. There was almost an immovable deadline. In her case, trusting, waiting upon the Lord is not seeking God's will in the sense of should she go or should she not go. She's already made the decision. So waiting upon the Lord for Esther was to give her the confidence and the clarity and the ability and to deal with the confrontation later on. Okay. So that's something that we need to recognize. But the interesting part is when the king asked, "What is it that you want?" and he was in a very generous mood, right? Esther delays in telling the king, okay, not once but twice. Okay, so let's look at this particular case now. As they were drinking wine, okay, let's continue on, right? Verse 6, as they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now, what is your petition?" Second, yeah, the king again invited her. "What is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Okay? And Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this." And you're waiting for her to line up everything. Yeah? But instead, she seems to pull back. She said, "If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Yeah. So there she was. The iron is hot already. Why didn't she strike? Right? Especially she asked. Yeah. And the king has asked her 3 times. Right? What is your petition? What is your petition? What is your request? And not only that, he says, you can ask to even half the kingdom. I will give it to you. But yes, she said, my petition and request is this. Come for another dinner. Come for another banquet. Okay. Hi. Why? Okay. Okay. So when we look at the king's delight, okay, says we find that Esther's approach is so different from Vashti, right? Okay. We see her meekness. We see her being demure in the sense that she was gentle. She did not rush in. She dressed herself well. She caught the king's attention by her posture, right? Her meekness, and the way she puts it across is that if she, oh yes, king, she did not say, okay, this is my prayer list, okay, my request, yeah, okay. But he says, if it pleases the king, okay? Not only once, but twice. If it pleases the king. So why did Esther delay in placing her request? I'm not sure anybody would like to unmute and just to throw in some reasons. Anybody would like to share? I can't see any faces on my screen. I'm just looking at my PowerPoint at the moment. Yeah, yeah. But let me just suggest a couple of things. One, it could be a cultural norm, all right? In that, a lot of times deals are made over meals, all right? So, and we see that in the book of Esther, at least 10 banquets are recorded. And we find that a lot of times, these are times where important decisions were made. Like even that time when Haman had a meal with the king, and then there was a decision that was made during that time. Okay, there was a terrible decision that was made. But here you are. It could be a cultural. So meals and conversation are an integral part, right, of making decisions, of making transactions. So the king knew that Esther must have something troubling her, that she took the risk of approaching him without him summoning her. So he knows that there's something on her mind, something critical, something important. That's why he asked. Yeah, and he waited. The second reason could be the timing was not right. And in the first time, it could be that that number one, that the king could have been in a particular situation whereby she could have just it could have been a tough day. Like he could have held court, and he had a lot of problems, and now she's going to present him with one more problem, and especially she's going to ask him to reverse a law, right? That it has been issued, okay? And it's going to cost him, although 10,000 less, 10,000 talents less, it's less than and half his empire, but yet, okay, it's going to affect him. Okay, maybe not so much of financially, but also, he's going to lose face. So it's going to be a very difficult situation for her to ask for a reversal of a law, right? And in doing so, she will have to reveal her own identity. And what is worse, you see, to ask a reversal of a law, or to find that to have the fact that your husband finds that you have been she has been not completely truthful about herself, right? So the king could have been in a worse situation, who could have reacted very badly. Yeah. And unlike Moses, Elijah, when he heard from God, there were signs, there were wonders. But in this case, in the book of Esther, God is silent. There was no mention that God spoke to them or they received a sign of confirmation and things like that. She would have to rely on God to change the king's heart, right? And it's not something that maybe you call it women's intuition, but she says that maybe it was not right. Okay. And the third thing is that she was exercising wisdom and prudence. It could be possible at that time Haman was not in the picture. Initially, it was not in the picture. All right. And the first time, she asked them for about the king. She could have asked the king then, right? Before she organized the first banquet for them, right? But Haman was not in the picture yet. And it could be if she had told the king then word could have leaked out through the guards or through the servants or whatever to Haman, and Haman could have time to prepare a defense strategy, right? So she exercised wisdom. So she called Haman in for the banquet, the first banquet, right? But the fourth thing is that when the king agrees to go to her second banquet, right? Then in essence, if you read, you'll find that the way that she said this was this. Okay, let me say, what is your request? You see, if my petition and my request, if the king regards me, verse 8, right, with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet. That means that the implication that if the king comes to her second banquet, he is serious about granting her request. It is not the spur of the moment. It's not just because he's happy, and she is giving the king time to ponder really about what she's going to ask of him. And if he's serious about it, he will turn up. So that I believe the fourth point is a very strong point for me. Says, and the king at that point, because he's made this declaration publicly already, in the sense, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, right? Right? And if he's going to deny it, it's going to put him in a very bad spot as well. So that's, I believe, is the reason why Esther delayed in putting her request. So let's continue on, and this is we'll wrap up this final section here. Esther chapter 5 verse 9 to 14 says, Haman then was very happy, right? She attended Esther's banquet. It says he went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose or showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above all the other nobles and officials, right? Okay, as if the wife and the friends don't know, right? But yet, then he's got another news to share them. So, and that's not all. Verse 12. Haman added, I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet. Wow. Okay. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. Okay. Such a high honor already. But verse 13 says, but all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see the Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. As long as I see the Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. So his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. This will help us understand, how high is 50 cubits. 1 cubit is 18 inches, and 50 cubits is 75 feet. Okay, and it's about 5 stories high. Yeah. Why would they suggest something like this? And for Haman to actually follow along the idea, right? He thought he was promoting himself, but actually, if Mordecai is impaled on that 75 feet pole, all the attention will be on Mordecai and not on Haman. Yeah, Haman actually craved attention. So what is it? I call it the discontentment, right? Why was, with all the things and the trappings and the honor that Haman had and all the power, he was still unhappy. He was still unhappy with Mordecai, this Jew sitting at the corner there. I think one of the issues that he's facing, I think, is he had an idol in his heart, right? And that idol is the issue of respect, public honor, public recognition, we call it, in that way. In today's term, how many likes do you have on your post, on your Insta post and all those things, whether people speak kindly to you, or puji you, or praise you, or things like that, okay. So verse 9 says, Mordecai neither arose or showed fear in his presence, Of course, Mordecai knows the kind of person that Haman was, right? Prideful, insecure, all right, bitter and hateful. Okay? And we can do a study on pride, But Proverbs 11, among many verses, said, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. The more, you see, what we see is that Haman's emotions, right? If it fed the idol in his heart, if he received attention, if he received honor, if he received praise, if he received power, it fed that pride, that idol in his heart, and it grew, right? But when he was removed from it, the idol is not being fed, he responded negatively. He became angry and hateful, right? So that's his joy and his anger were simply the outward expressions of the idolatry of his heart. Of the idolatry of his heart. So in the first place, he restrained himself. Okay? But so what we choose to believe and our choice ultimately will determine our destiny. So one takeaway point I hope that is that we don't allow age-old conflicts like these conflicts between the Jews and the ancestors of Haman, right? To poison your life. Okay? So this is something for us to remember. Okay? So something about the godly contentment for us. Okay? We all know this already. I just want to put it up there for us. It says Paul himself write to Timothy just to warn him. There are preachers, teachers, leaders in the church that seek to gain wealth for themselves. He says to Timothy, no, remember, godliness with contentment is great gain. Okay, so he challenged Timothy and us today, pursue holiness in conduct, attitude, and thought. So learn to be content in whatever circumstances that God has given us. Paul was content when he was, remember, he was writing from prison, right? In the book of Philippians. Okay, and flee from all this eagerness to get rich and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Paul writes to Timothy. So, and Proverbs remind us, don't wear yourself out in trying to get rich, right? Cast but a glance at riches for today, for tomorrow they are gone. Okay? So be warned against pursuing riches. And Matthew 6:19 also mentioned about that, right? So if we have a desire for godliness, we have to be careful that it's not eroded by a greedy and covetous spirit. Okay? So something about godly contentment for us. So to close, there's 4 questions. You may want to take 1 or 2 to reflect upon. Number 1 could be, what do you need to wait upon God right now? Are there areas that you need to wait upon the Lord right now? Okay? Areas of crisis, areas of uncertainty, areas of danger. Yeah? Do you need to wait upon the Lord? Number 2, what risks are you taking for the cause of Christ? Number 3, are there any areas of resentment that you need to deal with? Number 4, what areas of discontentment do you face? What do you need to get right with God or sort things out with the Lord? So this is the lesson from the book of Esther, chapter 5, on beauty's the meal. And God bless each and every one of us. Thank you very much.